It's like a Navy bean soup they serve at the White House.
No.
The Navy mess.
No, the U.S. Senate.
That's what I'm saying. It's like that.
Okay, and
The beans are white.
they served it. Well, it's navy beans. Although I did mine with 15 beans, and it's been served.
Oh, you left some? You brought some?
It's been served. Yeah, it's been.
Oh,
served
that's what that cryptic email was
It's been
about.
served in the Senate since about 1890.
I have had some.
In any case, I'm good here. You
I
know
mean,
that
they
my
serve it
sound's okay?
not just in the cloakroom; they serve it in the cafeteria there too. When I was in Washington, as a student, actually, it was it Claire Engel, whoever the senator from California was,
I know that name.
invited me to lunch.
But here's the deal. There's enough soup there for you and Carrie. And you got all the whatever I brought last time, the tostada stuff. I hope you enjoyed that.
Oh man, those tostadas are really. I mean,
You got You got to go. You got to go to
Gonzales.
Gonzales Market in Costa Mesa.
in fact,
Don't miss that. You're going to enjoy that a lot. Anyway, there's enough Senate soup out there for both of you. I want you to pour out enough that whatever you need, and then there's a piece of ham. So you're going to heat your soup. You're going to dice your ham and put the ham in at the last minute. You don't want to cook the shit out of the ham. I've already done that with ham hocks.
I see.
And there's a lot of ham in it already.
It takes the flavor out.
And so the flavor's going to be, I think it's good. Whatever it is, that's going to be what you're going to have. Anyway, so you're going to take what you need, and the rest is going to go home with her.
Okay.
Okay. And there's 2 bags of ham. You got that, Carrie?
Yeah, she got that.
Okay. All right.
And what was the question I was going to ask? Forgot.
I like it.
When you can see your mind getting,
It's names. It's names.
It's funny.
It's names.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Because then when I think of, my memory is good, but there's a little, it's interspersed with stuff.
Well, yeah.
With my
We aren't what we were, and we're.
My circulation. Oh, that's.
Yeah, we are. We just aren't.
From T.S. Eliot.
Is that what he said?
We are what we are, but
Yeah.
Come, my friends. We have. It's proof. It's.
Do you?
What's his name?
You probably have read more than I've read. Do you still read a lot?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Do you have more than one thing going at a time?
Oh yeah.
That's a great book.
Have you read this?
Yeah, I read it. It's great.
It is great.
I love
What is it? What's the book?
I love
My personal
Everett.
Everett. This guy is I just discovered him.
I've read every book
Have
he's
you?
ever written.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Yeah,
He's
he
one
really
of my
is.
favorite writers.
He is. He's now one of mine.
He's a cowboy.
I want to
He
see.
has a bunch
Show
of
me.
books about living rurally.
Oh, is that right?
But he's a professor at
At FC, yeah.
He's
And
I love
Erasure
him.
almost won the Booker Prize.
Right. An American the book. Erasure. But did you see the movie? There was a movie made about his life that was a great movie. It's called American Fiction.
Oh,
It came
yeah.
out last year.
Right.
That's one of his books.
Oh, right.
Adapted to
Exactly.
film.
I got to see that. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
And
You'll
read the
love-
book,
It's
yeah.
funny. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
He's something else.
Yeah. Okay, you guys are recording. You're live.
Oh. So, did you see
So
my?
now you tell us we're live.
Did you see my premise for today?
Oh, yes. Early years.
Early.
Yeah.
People, places, and things.
Okay.
Okay, that's it. I kind of planted that, and maybe you've been thinking about it. I don't know. I've got stuff to say about it. talking about we can't get all this stuff into a usable, etc. I mean, I grew up and there was no television. My first 10 years, I don't think there was any television. At least first 7 years there was no television. I don't think television hit LA until about maybe 48.
That's about right.
I'm not certain about that, but it's in that neighborhood. So for me, my dad was an accountant. He didn't have his own office someplace else. It was in the house. I guess he was getting started. He'd be at the table with his hand crank, little bitty, not the Remington that you plugged in, but analog, I guess you'd have to say, where he'd put the numbers in and he'd crank it, put the numbers in. It was mechanical. And while he was doing that, I was on the linoleum floor, and the radio was right there on a low stool, and so I listened to the radio. And what I'm talking about is probably the Lone Ranger, maybe the Cisco Kid. There were soap operas. I mean, I don't know what I was listening to, but I'd be listening to the radio. Yeah, right. Until the train horn honked, because 5 doors down, I'd run out of the house and the train would come down the track. Now, in the early 40s, that train would be full of troops. And that didn't last very long, but that train was full of troops. It came down Salt Lake Avenue, 5 doors from my house. When it rained, the water ran into Salt Lake Avenue, and it went curb to curb, curb to curb. And that was so cool because I never saw anything go curb to curb, and it would maybe be 6, 8 inches deep. When I got a little bit older, I'd walk the tracks, and I'd find liquor bottles on the tracks. And I would take and I'd throw the liquor bottle at the tracks, and they would explode, and glass would go everywhere, and I suppose they should have put me in jail, but that's what I did. One day I did it, and I missed the track, and the bottle hit the hood of a car that was driving by. Fortunately, the car just kept going. The car just kept going, and I was a little more careful about throwing bottles at the railroad tracks.
What railroad tracks are those?
Salt Lake Avenue. Where they went, I have no idea. I think they're still there today. They were the dividing line between Bell on one side of the tracks and Huntington Park on the other side of the tracks.
So the tracks ran east and west? The
tracks did not run east and west. By my house, I would say they more ran north and south, as I think about where the sun came up and where the sun went down. Yeah.
So Bell was east of Huntington Park?
Yes, east of Huntington Park.
Okay.
West was Huntington Park. What was the name of that city? Right next to us. It was small and it was sort of nothing.
Not Southgate.
No, Southgate was south. I could have gone to Southgate High. I could have gone to Huntington Park High School because I went to State Street School, which is on the border between the two of them. So I had to choose that, and I went to HP.
No passenger cars went down those tracks?
Initially, they did. Troops train. It was a troop train. Troops coming back from probably Long Beach or something, getting deposited maybe at the Union Station. I mean, I'm just guessing about all that. I don't really know, but it was troop trains. But that didn't last very long.
Were they in car?
They were in passenger cars. Yeah, passenger cars.
So they were seated.
And then after that, it was all freight. Nothing but freight. And I think it kind of timed out at some point. I can't even tell you when. But man, did I love that. I mean, anybody seeing trains. I've got a friend who lives in Oceanside, and he is deep into trains, and he just loves the old steam locomotives. Have you ever heard of a big boy?
Yeah.
The big boy is the Union Pacific train, the largest train ever built, fully loaded with coal and water. It weighed, I think it weighed a million pounds, over 1 million pounds. Now, you can do the math. That might be 500 tons or something like that. But the big boy was the largest steam locomotive ever built. And I just saw today, I've got on my Facebook, there are reels, and I'm kind of follow this because I like to communicate with this kid. And they restored 8 of them. But they're really big ones. When I was a boy, we had a ping pong table. And that ping pong table was in one side of the garage that we didn't use. And I ended up putting my electric train on that ping pong table. My dad put rails around that table so it was kind of contained. And we drilled holes and put all the wiring and everything underneath. And there was a control panel. And my control panel had one arm on it, and it was a transformer that wasn't the best transformer. The best transformer was can't tell you the name of it, but the kid next door that was 2 years younger, he had the good transformer, and that transformer had sticks, and I don't know exactly what the 2 sticks did, but that transformer was kick butt compared to my little bitty transformer. But electric trains and all that were really a lot of fun. The biggest thing that ever happened to me when I was, in terms of places and experiences, was when I was 11, 12 years old in August of that year, August 15th, for as a matter of fact, we went to East Los Angeles. We got on the City of Los Angeles. We were in a Pullman car, nothing but black waiters in starched white cotton outfits, and it was like Christmas. I mean, I couldn't wait to get on that train, and we rode that train, and we got off in Washington, D.C., we got off in Springfield, Massachusetts, and then we came back down through Georgia and skirted the south and went through all the way across Texas and back to Los Angeles. It was a 3-week trip. Never been on anything like that before.
Was it a holiday, or you?
It was vacation.
Relatives?
It was we visited my dad's best friend back in Springfield, Massachusetts. Dr. Lou Ayers. He was either an optometrist or an ophthalmologist. I think he was an optometrist. And we went to his house. And back on the East Coast, you got hardwood forests, much different than you have on the West Coast. West Coast is conifers and you know, we've got the shimmer and whatever like they do in Colorado, but we don't. Aspen, we got that sort of thing. But back there, they lose all their leaves. Winter is completely different than spring and summer back there because the green, you know, the hillsides are bare, and there's nothing like the fall colors back there.
What time of the year was this trip?
This was August 15th through the first part of September.
So the trees did have leaves.
Yes, they did. They did. And Lou Ayres had a house with I guess a pretty large piece of property with woods nearby, and I remember walking through those woods and being impressed because I hadn't seen that sort of thing before. And but riding on the way from Los Angeles to Chicago, the city of Los Angeles crossed prairie, and in those days there were herds of antelope. There were actually herds of antelope that you could see as you were motoring down the track in that train. You could see the herds of antelope. Buffalo, I don't remember buffalo, but I do remember antelope. And I remember 2 things about I think probably the first night on the train. I know that all 3 of us ate in the dining car, and a meal for 3 was $10. Meal for 3 was $10.
The total bill.
The total bill, and at the end of that meal, they brought a faux silver. It's sort of I don't know. There's a plate that they call it. It's supposed to look like silver, but it's not silver. And in that silver, there was I think it was kind of like a cupcake thing, and it was full of water. And they brought it to me and put it in front of me, and I looked at it and I started to drink it. And no, it was a finger bowl. It was a finger bowl. After you ate, you put your fingers in the finger bowl to clean yourself up.
You were getting ready to drink the finger bowl water. And then there was, and I had my first, and this is probably more than anybody wants to know, but that's the nature of me. I think I had my first
sexual fantasy, maybe, and I probably not on that trip. We met a mother and a girl, her daughter, who was 13 or 14, and I was sexually stirred, not by the daughter. I was sexually stirred by the mother, and at 12 years old, I'm not sure I can explain that would make sense, but I do remember that. I do remember that, and anyway.
And can you still picture the prominent features of the mother?
Maybe I shouldn't take it to this step, but at one point, what I saw that I think stirred me was that she got on the couch of the bed, and she probably didn't have a short skirt on in those days, but she had black nylons on, and it kind of her dress rose up, and I think that was the moment that I noticed a lot.
Right. I can imagine. Yeah, because you're in the valley of the living.
Yeah.
And you're getting a peek in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's dark.
Yeah.
The dark recesses of.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Anyway, I've got two kids, so I do know about sexual stuff, and I love my kids, and they've got kids, and life goes on, and man, I'm 83 years old, and I want another couple of decades, and I'm probably not going to get them, but boy, would I love them. I don't think I've ever appreciated life as much today as I have, and I think that may be a function of my life is fading. I think that may have something to do with that. I've never been in the 8th decade before, so I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to behave or act or what it's all about, but man, I'm enjoying all of it. And I tell you, I appreciate all life. Life is to be honored and preserved, and it seems like there's so many that just are so busy trying to find their riches that they don't think about the value of the place and the miracle of the place where they live. And it doesn't seem to be everybody feels like it's going to go on forever. And it seems to me that science is telling us that we got to take better care of our planet. And I don't think we're doing the things we ought to be doing to take care of it. It causes me great pain. And I don't want to go into Donald Trump here, but I really don't, because that's something I don't want to talk about either. Anyway, tell me about a person or a place or whatever.
My earliest memories of growing up, and in those early years, which would have been post-World War II, in the inner city in Watts, just miles from where you described you grew up, and they would be about my yard, especially my backyard, because I spent a lot of time in my backyard. I remember, and my earliest memory is pre-walking, before I could walk. And why I remember this is amazing, but I was in a cradle, a makeshift cradle that was not used as a cradle. It could have been an orange crate, but what my mother did was fix it up as a cradle for me to lay in. And I remember laying in this box with blankets and covers and a little parasol over the top of it to protect my head, because my mother was outside chopping wood, and she didn't want to leave me inside because I was, I guess I know I couldn't walk, so I must have been,
one or two. Huh? I mean,
maybe
between
less than one.
Yeah, and you remember that,
and it was raining, and so she put a little awning over the top of this makeshift cradle, manger, if you will, that she put together. And for this roughly 30 minutes, she was making fire. she was she was converting some logs that we had in the backyard, and I don't know where they came from. Maybe my dad had cut down a tree that had died because we had get this in this backyard. We had an avocado tree.
Gotcha.
We had a fig tree,
Okay.
and we had a pomegranate tree.
Okay.
Those three items are the heart of a fruit-based diet now,
Okay.
because they all have
Uh-huh.
this
Yeah.
nutritional value, and I had them in my backyard.
Mhm.
But in the course of of uh, this memory is that I'm looking up at my mother, who I can see off to one side of this cradle, and she's splitting these logs of wood.
Fireplace, barbecue.
We had a fireplace, and we used the fireplace. In fact, I think it could have been, because I do remember the installation in our house there on Compton Avenue of the central heating, of the heater
Okay.
that was in the floor. Because when I was a little older, about 3 or 4, I burnt mine.
Yeah, I bet you did.
I burnt my
We had that
my
too.
leg on it,
We had that.
and so I remember it very well. But this was before that, and so what I'm thinking is that fireplace was the primary source of heat for the living room, which was contiguous to the dining room, and there were bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and
No
the
forced
kitchen
air.
wall.
No forced air. That was
No
the
forced
source of
air.
heat.
That was it.
Yeah.
You know, and so it didn't get very cold in Southern California.
Yeah,
so it
thankfully.
wasn't. But both my father, who was raised in rural Texas pre-World War One, and my mother, who was raised on a 160-acre ranch in South Texas, in Tex-Mex, would not have had electricity. In fact, I think Lyndon Johnson, when he was a senator, drove rural electrification in Texas as a political boom, and
As a senator
and
or president?
as a senator.
Okay.
He was the majority Senate
Gotcha.
leader
Gotcha.
and had a lot of power under a president like Eisenhower, who was not that assertive. He wasn't as assertive as a president that he was as a general. And so Lyndon kind of ran the country. And whatever Lyndon and Sam Rayburn agreed to, Dwight Eisenhower, the president, would sign off on it. And so he brought rural electrification
Probably in the 50s.
to Texas in the late 40s and in the early 50s. And so I say that to say that my parents, who were from different parts of Texas, probably weren't familiar with electricity until they got to California, or for that matter, for natural gas until they got to California. So I'm pretty sure that heater in our dining room area of this merged dining room living room was the first mechanical heating device they had. In any case, my mother built a fire outside on this rainy day, and the rain is coming down very lightly, and she's chopping this wood to bring into the house. But also, she built a little fire there. We had in those days in the backyard incinerators.
Yes. Yes,
and
of course.
And in those days,
Yes.
you burned your own trash. You didn't put it in a can and put the can
That's
on
exactly
the curb
right.
for a
I
picnic.
love my incinerator.
And you burn
It's
paper,
fun.
you burn all
Yeah.
sorts.
Yeah.
I used to particularly like to see milk cartons burn because the waxy exterior
that
would
melt.
kind of melt, and you'd watch it, and it was transfixing. to just stand there and
And the
watch
barrel
this
with cans. You had your barrel with cans
Yeah,
and
barrel-
bottles.
that's right,
That you set out.
you know.
Yeah.
And we actually-
garbage.
we
At
actually
one
had
time
a-
it was garbage.
We actually had a very nice incinerator.
So did we.
We had a
So did we. It had a smokestack and
it was covered in
it
cement.
kind of
you know.
stuck out like this, and,
Yeah.
and you had
And
to take care of
the
ashes.
It looked like a little silo in the middle
And
of
most
the
winter
backyard.
mornings, you'd get up and you might go out and do that. And then if you looked off towards Los Angeles, there would be nothing but a very dark sky. It would be clear here, but over there it would be dark. And it would be dark because they were smudging. There were smudge pots that they would burn on cold winter nights when it froze, so that the citrus would not freeze. They warmed the grove with smudge pots. I could take you today to a mailbox that I know is fashioned from an old smudge pot. Yeah,
In Los Angeles County?
No, near Upland. When I go to the kids' house, there's somebody that's got a smudge pot over there.
I saw smudge pots in Orange County.
Yeah. Oh,
Which in those days
called Orange
was
County.
full of orange groves.
it's called Orange County.
and lemon groves.
For sure.
And lime groves,
Mm-hmm.
which are now housing tracts now. But I remember seeing smudge, but I don't remember seeing smudge pots in the city. But I know what you're talking about.
No, I don't think it was in this. I don't know exactly where it was, but the smudge pots, smudge is smudge, and so there was so much of it that it would fill the sky. You'd never have that today, right? I think the smudge pots were replaced by apparatus that move air, and moving the air, I guess, protects the orange groves these days. I'm not sure. I want to ask you this. I know how much my parents paid for their first house. Do you know how much your dad and mom paid for that first
I think
home?
it was $8,000.
Okay, you got to put. Can you put a year on it?
That they bought the house, 1935.
Wow, that seems like a lot of money. That was in Watts. In Huntington Park, my parents, in probably, I'm going to say 1940, no, it'd have to be over 45. Between 45, I'm going to say 47. In 47, they bought 2 lots. One lot with an old farmhouse on it that had been there for ages, and next to it, another lot. They were both 50 feet across, and I don't know, maybe 70 feet deep. And they bought a vacant lot and a farmhouse that they later, my dad added 2 bedrooms. I think it was just 2 bedrooms. And this old farmhouse was caving in on the soil in Huntington Park is sandy. Must have been an old riverbed through there. I just don't know, but it's a very sandy loam. And that house was like this. And the house he built was, the 2 bedrooms were kind of like this. The pitch on the roof here was like this, and the pitch on the roof here. So it wasn't a great design. And then he built a garage next door to that. And that garage, he put a bathroom in for some reason. I don't know why, but he did. And he liked to build things. He was a pretty good builder. He had a table saw, and he would build furniture and things. Not a lot of it, but I got my interest in that because of what we had and what we did right there. And then he built and then he paid. And for what I'm telling you, the farmhouse, that lot, and this lot with nothing, that's it, $4,000. Now, I probably am wrong about that. If you paid $8,000 for a single house in Watts, I would expect, and in the 30s, I would expect $4,000 for what I've just described might not be right.
How many bedrooms were in the house?
Well, there was one bathroom, and the bathroom had a tub with feet on it. And in those days, how often did you take a
tub?
How often did you take a bath?
Once a week.
That once a week.
Saturday night.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
And mom would go in there and scrub me, and it was once a week you took a bath. That was normal.
Yeah.
That was normal, and we did not have a shower.
Right.
Didn't have a shower.
We had a shower, but we never used it.
Yeah.
I don't know who used it.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody used it.
And mom every Sunday was chicken stew or brisket and homemade lemon pie, homemade biscuits. Mom was a
you have a lemon
wonderful
tree?
cook. We did not have a lemon tree,
So
but
she
we
bought
had
the lemons?
we had a coop. We had a chicken coop, and Dad had chickens, and it ended up kind of behind where we built the garage next door, and we had eggs, and to this day I have never seen a two yolk egg, but we had, whether it was when the chickens were young, that's what they laid, or I mean, I don't even know. But
I'm very familiar
two
with it.
two yolk eggs. We had those.
That's very interesting because we had chickens too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And that was my first adult project when I was 4 or 5 years old. My dad brought home 300 little baby chicks.
300.
300 little baby chicks.
That's a bunch.
And I nursed those. I remember losing 4 before when they were in the house.
That's a damn big cage, isn't it?
Several boxes. Several, like 4 different boxes that were sectioned off, and the little chicks were in these the cubby holes within these boxes. And I fed them. I gave them water. I moved them outside when they got after about 2 weeks or so.
But little chicks become chickens. How did that? I mean, what
Well,
happens when they get big chickens?
We had a chicken yard.
A yard.
We
Part of your
actually-
fenced off, huh?
We had it actually fenced off, and there was a chicken coop, a wood shed
Where they would go.
chicken coop where they laid. And then there was a yard where they ate, and I'd throw the scratch
Mash.
and the mash on the ground, and they would come
Go
and
after it,
eat,
huh?
and so forth and so on.
They'd
And
call that
was
free range today.
And we ate all of those. Eventually, ate all of those chickens. We had eggs for years, as many eggs as we ever wanted. And you reflect on that now with the price of eggs. An egg almost cost $1.
Oh, I know. I know.
$9.99 for a dozen eggs.
Right.
That's $1 an egg. The highest price probably that's ever the world market for eggs has ever commanded is right now in the United States because of the bird flu.
Okay. What you said about the cradle and what you said about being probably less than 1 and remembering that, if you ask me my earliest memory, it would be when I was 2 or 3, but the most vivid early memory I ever had was I must have been 4 years old. I had taken a nap, and my mother, in her arms, took me out on the back porch of a house we were renting on Walnut Street in Huntington Park. And the sunlight, I remember how bright the sunlight was, and I heard horns, and I heard this and that, and it was the day that the war had ended. World War II was over, and the word had arrived, and the celebration had begun, and I was blinded by the sun and heard horns because of the celebration for the end of World War II.
I remember the jets.
Okay.
Flying over the house, and they were flying low. And they weren't necessarily headed toward LAX, which was only about 5 miles from our house. And we were in the flight path, the approach into LAX.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so we had a lot of aircraft flying over the house a lot of the time when I was growing up. And most of the time, I was in the backyard, and I would catch sight of the plane on its approach pattern from the east, coming in from the desert, and watch it all the way over my house, and then as it descended.
And at night, there'd be the lights, and it was sort of like the planes would be stacked.
But the day the war ended, I want to say Truman was coming to Los Angeles.
Okay.
Truman was president. And I was wondering why there were so many jets, and they were flying low and hot dogging it in the air. And I asked my mom, she said the war is over, and the president of the United States is coming to Los Angeles. It was like he was on his way to the Pacific, maybe to Hawaii or Japan or wherever. But it was definitely something that I remember because it was scary. I had never seen the planes fly that low, and there were military aircraft that loudly flying over our
You
home.
talked about incinerators.
And they weren't jets. They were, just regular old B-29s.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
My first ride was on a DC-9 to San Diego for the experience. And I guess I don't know how old I was then, but that's how you got to San Diego, was on a DC-9 twin propeller, I think, airplane. Yeah.
What year was that?
Oh, I can't put a name on that.
That was before 1950.
Actually, I did no traveling. I had done no.
Yeah, but
because
you
we
did
went on the
take
train.
a cross-country trip.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure that I left Los Angeles County until I was maybe 8, because my earliest memories of going outside of Los Angeles County were to San Diego, and at that point,
I hated that drive.
It had been to see my brother, who was in the Navy
in San Diego. Okay.
And as a Sunday road trip, we'd drive to San Diego to spend some time with him because he had to stay closer near the base. He was a midshipman, first year, and we drove down to San Diego. It was a 3.5 hour trip.
And
no freeway.
And the main drive was
no
not a divided highway.
freeway.
No divided highway.
We went through.
You'd pass a car at your own risk because you'd be going head on into the traffic.
It was a one-lane highway in each direction.
In each direction.
Yeah. But it was beautiful because it was right on the ocean.
That was PCH, but if you were inland a little bit, it was nothing but damn orange groves, and I got sick of orange groves. I didn't want to. If I saw another orange grove, it was one too many.
That's right. It was all. It was. I can remember just going row after row of trees.
Yeah.
And those are the times when California grew oranges for export.
Yeah,
only Florida does that now. I think. I don't think California. We may send a few oranges to Japan, but for the most part, they were. It was a big business. We had, and then, but my first airplane flight wasn't until I got to Whittier College.
Oh my God!
My sophomore year. I flew with the football team to, let's see, where did we fly to? Humboldt. Okay. We played Humboldt State. We lost the game my sophomore year, my first year. But that was actually
who was the coach? Coryell? No, not Coryell.
John Godfrey.
John Godfrey.
Yeah.
Godfrey was always the coach, wasn't he? He was
always my coach.
Always your coach. Yeah.
Coryell.
Did Godfrey follow?
Immediately, he was the assistant coach for Coryell.
Oh, okay.
When I was a freshman, and we had a guy by the name of Max McCartney, who was our freshman coach. And then the year that we would have moved up as sophomores to the varsity, Coryell left to become the backfield coach at USC, and Godfrey became the head coach. And so I played all 3 of my years.
Godfrey couldn't keep track of the names of his players, so
he couldn't keep track of the name of his players, and he couldn't keep track of the plays.
What would he?
He'd just say he'd send the play in, and the play would be, he wanted the pass. He wanted, say, a Doug Bennett to throw the pass to Stan Sanders, and he'd just say he wouldn't give us the play. He just said Sanders. And whoever was bringing the play in from the sideline, that's all they said. Just throw the ball.
If you saw him,
I would then tell Doug, "Let's do this. Let's do that."
I'm trying to think. If you saw him on campus, he'd say, "Tiger." I think did he say Tiger?
Everybody was Tiger.
Everybody's Tiger. Everybody's Tiger. John Godfrey.
Yeah.
And then there was Papa. Well, we're getting too ahead.
That's too far.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Far. We have to go back.
I'm back to my vacant lot. So what you talked about incinerator. Love my incinerator because I could go out there and play with fire. But then we had a vacant lot, And we'd accumulate stuff, and we'd have bonfires. You'd call the fire department, and you'd tell them, gonna. In fact, I think you might have needed a permit to burn a bonfire on your property. I'm not certain of that, but I think you might have needed that. But at least if we didn't have a permit, we at least notified them so that they didn't see all this smoke and come try and put it out. And so we would have
how
bonfires.
big a fire was a bonfire?
Well, it'd be as big as this table right here, pile of wood
you didn't need a permit
and
for
all that kind of stuff, and you'd light it on fire, but then you'd have coals. And, and we'd take baked potatoes, and we'd wrap them in tin foil, and we'd put them in the coals. And then we'd eat the baked potatoes, and, you know, they were the best baked potatoes you ever ate.
They must have been great, yeah.
No matter how bad they were.
Yeah. So you actually had bonfire parties.
Oh yeah.
In your backyard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think we even pissed on the bonfire, and it's really nice to piss on your bonfire because it goes. Psst.
You put it out.
That was after we ate the bonfire. And then we.
Was that with you and your brothers, or you and your friends?
Okay, there you go. So we talked people, places, and things. My two best friends were Norm and Jimmy. Norm lived right next door to me. At one time, and his folks had this beautiful Cadillac, and in those days, a Cadillac was known for its
tails,
its fins, its tail fins. And I think it was a two-door Cadillac that came back and had these two, looked like shark's fins on one side and on the other side. So I remember their Cadillac. Their mom was named Bobby. His baby brother was Terry Kokeritz. His grandfather had L.A. Parkerizing. Now, L.A. Parkerizing probably wasn't too far from your house, but
What is that?
L.A. Parkerizing was where you would take metal, and if you wanted to have it rest-proofed or preserved or given not a painted finish, but a consistent finish, you took it to L.A. Parkerized, and they Parkerized it. I don't know whether that was their name for what they did or whether that was a thing.
Was that a coat of chrome?
It was no chrome. It was sort of a flat black. In fact, in 7th grade, I made a barbecue. I made it out of a farmer's disc that he used to plow the field, and I rolled a piece of metal that was probably a 1/4 inch thick and about 4 inches high, and circled it, and then I bolted a strip on the inside of it that fit the grate, and then on the bottom there were 3 nipples that I didn't weld on there, but the teacher welded on, and I screwed pipe into the nipples, and that's how we barbecued for a long time. And that whole outfit was sent to L.A. Parkerizing. It came back and it looked really nice. Yeah.
How do you spell Parkerize?
I have no idea. P-A-R Park I don't know, I-Z-E some way along the way.
Like park?
Like Parkerize.
A play.
A-R-I-Z-E.
Yeah. Parkerize. That's a new word for me.
I don't know.
Yeah, but I'm sure we may have had a different word for it. But it was a finish on a metal.
But got to get to
object.
I got to tell you that we'd have also, because it was sandy loam, we would make mounds. We'd make mounds, and then we had these cars, and we spend hours out there making roads and little tunnels and all kinds of stuff with our cars and that pile of sand, and that's how we had our fun. We did a lot of that. In 1952,
the pile of sand was on your property.
It was just right. We probably built it there. And then we'd also dig holes. And if you dig a hole and you put a board across it, then you had a place to hide.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't want people to know where you were hiding, so you had to camouflage it. So we would find weeds all over the place, and we would put weeds on top of our sand-covered board where we were hiding. Now, we might have put too many weeds on it. It might have stood out more with all our weeds than if we hadn't put weeds. But regardless, we needed camouflage because you didn't want people to find you in your hole. Mm. And so we did that sort of thing.
So you didn't pitch a tent over the whole.
No tents, no tents.
We did. We dug holes, but
Yeah.
we'd pitch a tent
On top of
it.
yeah,
Yeah, of what was basically discarded canvas or old blankets, and it looked like a teepee. You know, we were trying to emulate the early television shows and the pictures that we'd seen of teepees in the Old West.
In 1952, my dad built a house, a two-bedroom house on the vacant lot. He had an architect, and they made a plan, et cetera, back porch, dining area, kitchen, living room, and then I guess there were 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom with a hall. The house was built for $7,500, and in 1952, I think we might have moved into it, and if it might have been a little earlier than that. I might be conflating that with our trip to the East Coast on the train, but it was. I'm getting close with all that. In any case, next door was Norm Corcoritz. He was 2 years younger than I was, so I was more important because I was 2 years older in terms of the pecking order, I guess you'd say. And I remember we had we went to War Surplus. You've seen pictures of the Navy guy with a sort of a lanyard on, and he's got a microphone here, and he talks into the microphone, and he's got things like, it was sort of a military poster that they recruiting poster that they used for the Navy used. Anyway, we got a set of those, and out my bedroom window we had a wire that went up to our roof, over to his roof, and into his bedroom. And he had his, and so we could talk to each other with our earphones and our microphones.
That was a big deal.
So we had that, and that was a cool thing.
That was the beginning of the information highway.
And next to him was Jimmy. Now Jimmy was Mexican, and Jimmy he was also 2 years younger than me. So again, I was the big dog because I was 2 years older. So it's Rich, Norm Corcoritz, and then Jimmy Corella. And Jimmy had older brothers, Gilbert, Louis Gilbert, and I don't know who the third one was, but he had 3 brothers. And kind of a big rotund mom, and maybe a rotund, but the important thing about him was first television I ever saw. First television in the neighborhood was Jimmy's. And Jimmy's television was a mirror that was probably, I'm going to say about this big. But the television itself was quite large, like a piece of furniture. But the CRT is what we'd call it today, cathode ray tube. The picture was right here. And the picture then was, for some reason, the mirror was here, so the mirror caught the picture, and then you looked at the mirror through this window, and that was television. And so that was the first television I ever saw.
You had to look through one object.
You
to
looked
see
one
the
through.
Screen.
You never did see the screen. You saw a reflection of the screen. Whatever the picture was here, ended up on the mirror, and you looked at the mirror.
Was this covered?
It was. As I recall it in my old eyes here, in my old mind, it was, I mean, for a screen this big, the contraption was huge. Now remember, in those days, no transistors. So it was all tubes, vacuum tubes.
Right.
That's what the radios had, and that's what the first televisions had. And then the other place that we'd go look at television was down at the appliance store. And in the window of the appliance store, there would be television playing, and it wasn't that sort. His was, I think, really pretty early thing. Because I've kind of seen him on YouTube since, but I've never seen him other than that. Anyway, that's where we saw it, and boy, television was a big deal, and there was danger involved with television because they were sure that the radiation coming off the television was either going to ruin your eyes or ruin your mind or ruin something. So they ended up making yellow television screens because if they made, and they were marketed as being safer. So, and I want to say Hoffman televisions.
Right, that's what our brand was.
And it was a round screen, and it was not that big, and it was in a big box. And you did not have a clicker in those days. You went over and you turned the channel. It was all mechanical. It was like my dad's adding machine. It was mechanical, and if you think you had an antenna on the roof, because the antenna picked up the signal which came from Mount Wilson, where they had the broadcast towers, and
our first antenna sat on top.
And you would often have to go over and kind of move it left or right to get a better picture.
You moved it, you shuffled it around on top of
to get a better picture.
To get a better
black
picture.
and white.
Right.
All black and white.
And two
rabbit ears.
Rabbit ears.
Rabbit ears.
Yeah.
And then television was not 24/7. Forget about 175 channels and a recorder, and you can access and stream and all. No. Television was such a novelty that I'm sure I would sit on Saturday morning until Don Winslow in the Navy came on the television screen. I would sit and watch the test pattern, and the test pattern was something that the broadcaster used. Each corner had something in it, and then there was an Indian, I think, in the middle of it,
right.
and it had all kinds of this and that.
Oh, yeah, a feathered headdress.
And they used that test pattern. It was exactly what it was. It was a pattern where they could adjust their broadcast so that they sent the best signal possible to whoever was going to try and get it. And that was the test pattern. So you sit and watch the test pattern.
I watched when I had my tonsils removed.
Okay.
Later, maybe like when I was 9 or 10, when I was administered the anesthesia by way of a cup.
Got it.
To my nose and mouth.
Did it too.
The first thing I saw were test patterns. And when I was going out, as I was going out, I was, I saw these test patterns, and the very test patterns that you're talking about, looking at those early screens before the network or the TV station came online, that all you got on your television were these test patterns.
Give me one favorite TV program.
Time for Beanie.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. And tell me, who was on Time for Beanie?
Cecil, the
C6 Sea Serpent, and DJ, he was the bad guy.
Was he?
Yeah,
okay.
He was the bad guy.
I don't know.
All right, I got one for you. Space Patrol.
Space Patrol. I didn't watch Space Patrol.
Happy.
Happy. I think I watched.
Happy. Yeah. Buzz. Tanya. The girls had short skirts. Tanya was the brunette, and I don't know who the balloon was, or the blonde was, but short skirts. I remember the short skirts. So Space Patrol. Give me another. Can you get anything else?
No, I can't think of any more television. I just remember. I remember watching boxing with my dad.
I bet you
because
did.
If my father was home, he got priority on the TV.
Okay.
And he always liked to watch the news. Douglas Edwards.
Douglas Edwards in the news.
The forerunner to Walter Cronkite would come on for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was the evening.
National...
That was all the news that was on. But I always got in the habit of watching the news with my father, who was sort of in between jobs. And growing up in those early years, my father worked 2 jobs. He was a janitor at Stauffer Chemical, which may have been in Huntington Park.
Okay.
And then in the evening, he worked the night shift at the LA City Sanitation Department, collecting garbage all around.
Yeah.
And so
did your
I
mom
would see
ever
him
work?
in the middle. Never.
Never, yeah.
She worked as a poll worker on election night,
Okay.
and that was the only time I can ever remember her working outside of the house.
Your dad died at what age?
78,
And your mom?
66,
66.
and she died first. About 3 months after I left Whittier College for Oxford,
Okay.
and I was in Italy when I was notified that she had passed away. My dad actually passed away in the house. Well, so did my mom, but I was here, and I was married, and had just my wife had just given birth to my first son. So there, at one point, for a very brief period of about 6 months, from March until September of 1973, I was both a son and a father. But that only lasted for
Give me
6
3
months.
words that sum up each of them. The three words that comes. They're not going to sum them up, but sum up your dad, sum up your mom, and with 3 words for each. Could you? And I don't even know that I'll be able to do this. Maybe you can't. I don't know.
Well, take my dad. I'd say he was hardworking, conservative, very.
Political? Are we talking now, or are we talking
Yes.
financial?
He's a
Political
He was
too.
a Republican.
I'll be darned.
Republican who didn't ever vote Democrat. He thought Democrats were a bit of a lowlife.
Did not like Franklin Roosevelt.
Never voted for Franklin
Yeah.
Roosevelt. In fact, the accusation, the joke between my parents, both of them were Republicans, Lincoln Republicans, was that my father secretly voted for Truman in 1948.
Wrote him in or something, huh? Oh, in 48.
Yeah.
Secretly voted for.
Truman in 48 over Dewey,
Okay.
who was the Republican.
Okay.
And so he'd say to my mom, "No, I didn't. I voted for Dewey." And she said, "No, you did. I think you voted for Truman."
I don't remember. What was the slam on Dewey? No, I remember there was a
Dewey
headline
was the
that said he
governor of-
won. He
That's
won,
right. Right.
and Harry held up the paper.
Held it up, yeah. He was the governor. He was the district
New York.
attorney of New York,
City, probably.
and then became the attorney general of New York, and then became the governor of New York.
Okay.
And so he was, and he had cleaned up a lot of the corruption. in
You and
both the
I,
city and the
looking
state.
back on all that,
He was like a Giuliani who didn't go off the rails.
the crash of '29 was a national disaster to the extent that Herbert Hoover didn't have a chance, and then FDR came in and was before the whatever amendment it is. I'm gonna not the 25th, but you know what it is better than I do. He was elected 4 times.
Right.
He was elected 4 times.
Even
My
when
dad
he was
hated
almost
him.
dead in
My
1944.
dad hated him. He used to talk about him, and I don't even know why. I don't know why, but my dad was a Republican. Yeah. Anyway, I stepped on you. So conservative, you said, and hardworking and conservative.
Hardworking, conservative, and what would be the third? Athletic.
But he was.
He was
I
athletic.
bet he was. Did
And
he have your size?
Not that I saw it, but that
Yeah,
he
yeah.
he was quite a baseball player in his time, and claims that he would have been on the Negro
League?
baseball circuit if he didn't take the course of
Given
getting
you, that doesn't
married,
surprise me.
having children, all that sort of thing. My mother, the 3 words for my mother would be religious, and religious in the moral sense, not religious in the church attendance sense, because she didn't really go to church, but she read the Bible every day. Again, hardworking. For a woman, she did everything. My father was off the plantation, so to speak, earning currency.
Two
And
jobs.
my mother did
Two
everything.
jobs.
You know, she
Took
chopped
the
wood.
proceeds and made how many kids? How many
hewed
kids
the
we talking
water.
about? 3 or
At any one time there were 4.
Yeah.
Because the oldest child died in the epidemic of 1930, the whooping cough,
Ooh.
scarlet fever epidemic of 1930.
How old?
She was 11,
Oh my God.
and she was a prodigy.
To lose an 11-year-old and
And
then
your
lose
oldest
and then a
child.
son.
Yeah.
I mean, the trauma of that must have just.
They must, you know.
Whew, how don't you get over that? You don't get over that.
I think of that now, how they lost their 2 oldest children, about 15 years apart.
That was the way with my mom. However, she was from a big farm family, but I'm going to say a dozen, and I may not have that quite right. I can get it right, but may not have it right. But she talks about 2 children from diphtheria, I think is what she said.
Yeah.
In the same casket, buried in the same casket. 2 children buried in the same casket. Yeah.
Her siblings.
Her siblings. Yeah. 1 year, two children.
I
we
think,
got an asshole right now that doesn't believe in vaccines.
Yeah, but you think, you know, they must have had a very different concept of life then too, because of the closeness of death.
Death was
in the next room, all the time.
It was polio,
and it wasn't like you could if somebody was very sick. Nowadays, you take them to the hospital or the emergency room.
Right.
In those days, you just
polio was ours.
Shut off.
Ours was
the
polio.
Rest of the house.
Polio, iron lungs, for God's sakes. And you didn't go to public swimming pools because that's where you got polio.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Very different. Very different.
Very close. Mm-hmm. Whereas nowadays it's very distant. I was thinking, for example, to this day, I can count the number of dead bodies I've seen that weren't in a casket. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just, you know, mm-hmm. I mean, if somebody is injured or run over on the street, they'll put a sheet or something to cover them. Mm-hmm. But I, you know, the kind of, and which is one of my objections to the television fare of the day, because it's so bloody. Mm-hmm. And now they get even.
If it's blood, it
they've
leads.
made it even worse now because they'll show a blood splatter on the wall behind someone who's had his head blown off, or a body will be bleeding out on the concrete sidewalk, and they'll show the blood running down the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And that, you know, it's like, wow. But you don't get that at least I don't get that in real life. I mean, if somebody told me that somebody got hit down the street by a car and was lying in the middle of the street, I wouldn't go down there and look at it.
But they know that more people are going to watch their television when their broadcast, when that's their priority.
You know,
and
you could argue that you want to see.
And numbers is retail, and I'm told that if Sanders and partners want to advertise on the Super Bowl, it's going to cost you $8 million for 30 seconds.
$8 million.
$8 million for 30 seconds.
That's about as high.
That's a lot of retainer fees.
Well, like you remember Apple in its early days used to buy the 2-minute spot.
Okay.
Before halftime and before the end of the game. So at the 2-minute warning that the NFL started, Apple immediately started producing ads for that 2-minute warning at the halftime and at the end of the game.
Because that was always a given.
I think those started out at $1 million a minute. And that was when? 1900s.
8 million, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Today, 25.
8 million.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
so much more. Um, Good conversation. What are these people? What
I
has
have to
made
I have
children
to
going
go
to want
back
to
to
know?
the early days.
Yeah.
And I have to point out three
Okay.
things that are features about my backyard. One was that we had the tallest tree, a eucalyptus tree, probably in Watts. And that was my landmark. And I would just catch sight of
Okay.
that
Okay.
eucalyptus tree
Okay.
from wherever I was walking
Okay.
from and just walk toward it because that was home. The second thing is that we had clotheslines. And one of the small pleasures that I had as a kid was getting a stool out of the kitchen and helping my mother pin clothes up on the line.
Clothespins.
And you got these,
Clothespins.
well, you got these white sheets.
Yes.
They were just
Flapping in the wind.
flapping in the wind, and they were so
And
fresh.
it smelled good.
And they smelled great, and you slept on them that night. You know, it was
Crisp.
just great.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, which I think was really kind of one of my first study halls, was the gardens, the vegetable gardens. We had a good 50, a good, I'd say, 15 feet by 25 feet.
Of all sorts of things that end up on the table.
Corn, string beans, tomatoes in the garden, spinach, and I would. At first as a little tot, I had a little. My parents always left a little corner of the garden area for me to plant my radishes.
Radishes, of course. And they were
as I
easy
got
to grow.
larger, I participated in the large. But I remember, the first ears of corn the ears of corn I think I ever had before I went to, say, Whittier College, were ears of corn that were grown in my backyard. Same thing with string beans. And I think about that garden. I think about those 4 trees. I think about those clotheslines. I don't know why clotheslines, because you see them so rarely now. And when you see them in old movies, that's the first thing I think about, are the clotheslines in my backyard. Because I would run up and down the rows when the sheets were fluffing in the breeze and they were dry, and I just run up and down. And it was like I was in, a movie, because it was like, reels going by me and clouds were in the sky, and I'm running, and I don't know where I'm running, and I don't know when it'll stop, but I would just, at the end of it, just fall out and just lay prone at the
There you go.
at the sun, watching, and those are real memories, and they were all in my backyard.
So
I didn't travel, like I said.
spontaneously, I got to give you my 3 from my mom and 3 from my dad, and I don't even know what they're going to be here. But for my mom, love comes to mind. She was a uniter, always a uniter. I'm married to a woman like that right now, which I'm very grateful for. But the other thing is a wonderful cook. She used her cooking to unite people. People used to love to eat her food, and we would gather, and her food would be kind of the same. And she got a lot of praise for her food. The same thing happens with me to a certain extent, but not like my mom. But I get my interest in cooking because of what I witnessed and enjoyed from my mom. So love, food. What else about my mom?
Was she religious at all?
Yeah, that we were Methodists and we went to church, and she never taught Sunday school or anything like that. But no, religion wasn't the thing that came to my mind so much, other than the one incident that I may have said previously that stays with me forever, and that's when I was in high school. I went to the Christian church, because in those days there was the church where the certain group of people in high school, they would all kind of end up at that church, and this was the Christian church in Huntington Park. And I remember there was an altar call, I think almost every Sunday. I don't even know that for sure, but I was sitting down front, and the altar call happened, and I got up and I went forward, and my mom and dad always went to the Methodist church. But as I turned around and faced the congregation after what the pastor said, I can't remember. I looked up, and in the balcony, my mom and dad were standing, crying. And that has always stuck with me. Now, my dad, I think, if I'm being blunt, I'd say a drunk, because he was a drunk. Alcohol was something that I never saw a drink in his hand, but the can out in the backyard would probably have 20 half pints of Four Roses in it at the end of the week. I'm exaggerating because I never liked his drinking, but he was.
Did he change his behavior?
Oh yeah, he was a different. It was my drunk dad and my sober dad, and to this day, it took about 5 seconds to understand which dad I had when I got home. And he would drink to the extent that he had his own business, and you can only not get the job done and miss deadlines so long if you've got your own business. And I remember he'd get to the place where he had to take care of business, and he'd have a giant hangover, and but he'd be in there doing all the business to try and keep it going. But my dad also was. And I'm pretty good with people. I can get up, go talk to strangers, I can draw them out, and that was kind of my dad. My dad, I don't know whether he was looking for attention like I'm looking for attention. I don't know, but he was pretty good at that. And I knew he loved me, but I wasn't sure of it. But I was certainly sure of my mom's love. But he was a good provider. But then his smoking and his liquor took him down when he was 67 years old for the next 15, 20 years. And my mom, my poor mom, who had, I've talked to you previously about my mom, and I do want to say something about that, because you kind of alluded to it. And I think kind of what you said was, your mom, you can be mad at the doctor, but your mom might have had a little bit of part of that, and I'm thinking, you may be right, because at the point where Wes reconnected with her, when the first thing out of her mouth before anything was, "Richard, I got this phone call. I got to tell you about it, and don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone." In other words, there was still guilt or something going on, and that could easily have been because it wasn't just the doctor. But I don't care about that. I mean, I really don't. To my dying day, I appreciate your words. First of all, I respect you so much, so your words probably aren't nearly as valuable as I think they are. But regardless, I've taken those to heart, and I've shared what I said, and it really hit home about how, especially
with who, Chris?
No, with me.
You shared.
You can. Well, I've shared our conversations, but in essence, the lesson that you delivered to me, the lesson, and I think especially with men, we can get self-righteous, we can get outraged. I can certainly do it in a heartbeat with Trump, with reason, or with whoever who has slighted me, the guy that cut in front of me. I don't know any of it. And you can roll around in that, and you can get upset about that. But when it gets to the place that's what you do to, if you overdo that, you're screwing up yourself. You're not the guy that cut in front of me. He never even knew about it. And so that's what I'm saying in terms of, you can roll around in your rage, you can roll around in your self-righteous indignation, or you can find You can find the light in every situation. And this is what I've said long before we started meeting here. I don't give a damn what it is. It's never all bad. There's lessons to learn, and there's benefit from. I don't care what the horrible situation is, and I do believe that. I absolutely do believe that.
I think I learned that as a result of years of practicing law.
Ah, I thought it was because you're black and you had to deal with it so often.
I think it was because I heard and have heard so many stories from clients and found out that the truth later on was different. Because the client telling you his or her side of the story always was self-serving. In the retelling,
Thinking they're going to get the bait. They want the best result from you, so they're going to craft that story accordingly.
They're going to craft the story to their benefit.
Yeah, of course.
And sometimes they're right. Objectively, when you have an opportunity, if there is an opportunity to verify factually what it is they've told you, but a lot of times it's quite different. And it's always, and then you look back on the story that you originally got from the client, and it's always to the benefit of the client that the story is, and not ever to the detriment of, or to the opposite sentiment. In other words, if the client came in to sell the lawyer on taking the client's case, they put the best
Shine
front
on
on it, and you find out later on that it wasn't that way at all. I mean, there were other witnesses involved, and you talk to them or you depose them, and you find out a very different story. So I learned that tolerance by way of comparing different versions of the same incident, and that you have to give, I think, one of my favorite words of late has been grace, that you have to give a little grace from the very beginning to the stories that you hear, and say, that's a possibility, but here's another possibility too, and without trying to read into it something that maybe satisfies my mind, satisfies the mind of Stan Sanders, and I know I have biases and prejudices, and I'm trying to set those aside, and because you're really trying to get at something that's very difficult, maybe impossible to achieve, and that's the truth. But
I'll never know the
best
truth with respect to my mother. I just won't. But I've come to appreciate her on the basis of what she had to endure. I mean, to come to the West Coast with strangers and with an 8th grade education, and still as a teenager, having had a baby taken from her. I mean, that's pretty grim stuff. And I'm sure she wasn't sent with a whole bunch of money. I mean, she was dependent on those people completely.
Yeah. I think one of the we may have talked about it a little bit, but I've been thinking here recently about your mother's experience with Wes at such a very early age for her. I've been thinking about all of the slave tales that I've read. In fact, the first chapter of this book that I'm reading now, the first paragraph of the first chapter, talks about family separation. And one of the big issues that we have in American politics in 2025 is the policy of the federal government separating the parents
with
from their
using
children,
military.
and how that's a no that's a game changer. That when if you can show that the government is separating families, like Trump in 2020 at the border, it stops.